Agatha Raisin and the Secret of the Silver Key. On a crisp spring morning in Carsely, as Agatha sipped her tea and watched the village awaken, a stranger wandered into the market square clutching a silver key, and the quiet rhythms of the day began to unravel. Tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Drop your answer in the comments. I always enjoy learning more about our wonderful community. And do not forget to like and subscribe, it will motivate me for more mysteries every day. Now, let's get cozy and begin tonight's story. Chapter 1. A quiet village, a mysterious arrival. Agatha Raisin sat by the wide bay window of her Carsely cottage, the delicate porcelain cup warming her hands as she took a careful sip of Earl Grey. Outside, the village stirred to life in its usual gentle rhythm. The cobbled streets gleamed faintly with morning dew, and the scent of freshly baked bread drifted from the bakery on the corner. Birds chirped intermittently from the elm trees lining the square, their song weaving with the distant clatter of a milk cart. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary, the kind of calm that made Agatha feel rooted, safe, and, just for a moment, satisfied with the quiet life she had carved for herself here. Yet, as she lifted her teacup again, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Near the market square, a figure wandered with a hesitant, almost deliberate slowness. He was tall, dressed in a muted gray coat that looked slightly worn, and his head was tipped down as though he were guarding a secret. What truly made Agatha pause, however, was the silver key dangling from a faded ribbon around his neck. It caught the light in a way that made it seem alive, glinting sharply against the morning sun, yet the man treated it as though it were nothing more than an ordinary trinket. Agatha set down her cup with the faintest clink and leaned forward, her keen eyes tracking the stranger's movements. He paused at the fountain, adjusting the ribbon around his neck, then glanced quickly toward the bakery before moving on. The village, usually predictable, seemed to respond to his presence. A shopkeeper paused mid-sweep of her doorway, eyes narrowing, while an older woman with a basket of flowers muttered something to her companion and glanced over her shoulder. Even the children playing near the fountain slowed their games, curiosity etched across their small faces. Agatha's notebook lay on the windowsill beside her, leather worn from years of recording village oddities and minor mysteries that others found trivial. She flipped it open, the pages crisp yet familiar under her fingers, and began jotting notes in neat, careful script. Every detail mattered: the way the stranger's coat brushed against the fountain's edge, the subtle tension in the villager's shoulders, the curious glances exchanged and quickly concealed. There was a rhythm to these observations, a pulse that seemed to whisper. Something was happening here that warranted attention. A soft breeze rustled the curtains behind her, carrying the scent of honeysuckle from the garden. Agatha's cat, a small gray tabby with inquisitive amber eyes, rubbed against her ankle, purring softly as though sensing the shift in atmosphere. She bent down to scratch behind its ears, her mind working methodically, connecting the stranger's key to the fleeting reactions of the villagers. Who was he? And why did something so small, a simple silver key, cause ripples of unease across an otherwise serene morning? With a quiet determination, Agatha finished her tea, set the cup on its saucer, and pulled on her cardigan. Today, she realized, would not be like any other. The ordinary streets of Carsely, so familiar and comforting, were layered now with secrets just waiting to be unraveled. And Agatha Raisin, as always, would be there to observe, to question, and perhaps, to uncover what lay hidden beneath the calm surface of village life. For a moment, she simply watched, letting the stranger's figure fade into the movement of the marketplace, knowing that the thread had been pulled and the first signs of mystery had taken root. Agatha Raisin had just settled back into her armchair, her mind replaying the morning's unusual events, when a soft scuffle at the door caught her attention. At first, she thought it might be the postman, but the quiet, almost delicate noise suggested otherwise. Kneeling, she noticed a cream-colored envelope tucked neatly beneath the door, its edges slightly worn, as if it had traveled some distance before arriving here. No stamp, no return address, just a simple, unadorned envelope lying in wait. Her cat, ever vigilant in these small domestic mysteries, approached cautiously, sniffing the paper and tapping it gently with a paw. Agatha smiled at the creature's curiosity, brushing a stray lock of white hair behind her ear. "Well, It seems the universe has delivered more than just tea this morning, she murmured, bending down to retrieve the envelope. The paper was textured, the sort one might associate with old stationery, and the faint scent of lavender clung to its surface. She inhaled, letting the aroma mingle with the morning air and the distant hum of the village waking outside. Breaking the seal, she unfolded the letter, her eyes catching the neat, deliberate handwriting. The silver key opens what has been hidden for decades. The words, simple yet charged with implication, made her smile slightly, equal parts intrigue and amusement flickering across her face. Who had left this? And how did they know about the key she had glimpsed only hours ago? Her mind began to spin with possibilities, the ordinary rhythm of her morning now punctuated by the thrill of a puzzle. She set the letter on her lap and leaned back, letting her gaze wander around the cozy cottage. The floorboards creaked under the subtle movements of her feet, the clock ticked steadily on the mantelpiece, and the cat now sat perched on the arm of the chair, watching the letter as though it, too, understood its significance. Agatha's eyes swept over familiar furniture, noticing how the soft sunlight made the wood of her bookshelf glow, highlighting the spines of well-thumbed novels and carefully labeled notebooks. Everything felt slightly more alive, tinged with a sense of anticipation. Her investigative instincts kicked in. The handwriting, it was precise, almost old-fashioned, yet not entirely uniform. She ran her finger along a particularly looped S, noting the pressure of the pen. The lavender scent intrigued her. It was not a common fragrance for letters in Carsely. Perhaps the sender had gone to some trouble, she thought. Every detail she realized could be a clue. Small things, overlooked by most, often held the key to understanding larger secrets. Agatha jotted down a few notes in her leather-bound notebook. Letter, no return, lavender-scented, old-fashioned penmanship. Reference to silver key and hidden matter. Observe reactions in village. Follow any leads discreetly. The words flowed naturally, the act of writing itself calming her as much as it organized her thoughts. She glanced down at her cat, which now batted the envelope gently with its paw, and chuckled. Well, Flossie, it seems we have work to do. She lingered by the window, peering out at the village square. The market had come alive with morning activity, yet her eyes kept drifting back to the stranger from earlier. Was he involved? Or merely a coincidental witness to a long-forgotten secret? The combination of the letter, the key, and the mysterious figure painted a scene that was too curious to ignore. With the letter carefully folded and tucked into her notebook, Agatha rose, stretching slightly. She could feel the pull of the day ahead, a mixture of anticipation, investigation, and the familiar pleasure of a mystery that promised to stir both her mind and her senses. The village hummed softly around her, the usual sounds now carrying an undertone of secrets waiting to be uncovered. And Agatha Raisin, ever alert and infinitely curious, felt the first genuine thrill of discovery in days, ready to follow the trail wherever it might lead. Chapter 2. Clues Among Friends and Foes. The bell above the door jingled as Agatha Raisin pushed her way into the cozy warmth of the village café. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and buttery pastries greeted her like an old friend, and she took a moment to let the familiar comfort wash over her. The wooden floorboards creaked under her shoes, a sound she had come to associate with early mornings in Carsely, and the soft murmur of conversation filled the air. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, casting playful patterns across the polished tables. It was the perfect place to gather information discreetly, she thought, a little sanctuary where secrets often slipped out in casual remarks. Agatha settled at her usual corner table, the one closest to the window where she could observe both the interior and the street beyond. She ordered a pot of Darjeeling and a slice of the café's renowned lemon drizzle cake, her mind already scanning the room for potential sources of gossip. Mrs. Pettigrew, the café owner, was arranging croissants at the counter with her usual flourish, humming softly. A few regulars nodded at Agatha, each offering expressions ranging from warm recognition to thinly veiled suspicion. Perfect, she thought, a mix of familiarity and intrigue, the kind of environment where small clues often revealed themselves. As she sipped her tea, her eyes flicked to the couple at the table beside hers. They were speaking in hushed tones, glancing toward the door as if expecting someone. "A vault," she overheard the woman say, barely audible over the café's gentle clatter. "And the key, it must be important, somehow." Agatha's pen hovered over her notebook. She noted the words quickly but subtly, careful not to draw attention. Vaults, keys, hidden treasures. These were exactly the threads she needed to follow. From across the room, Mr. Hargrove, a retired solicitor with a penchant for opinionated commentary, spilled his tea in his distraction, muttering about those feuding families and the importance of protecting ancestral property. His spectacles slid down his nose as he glared momentarily at a man seated near the counter, clearly an outsider in the village's close-knit social web. Agatha recorded every nuance, the flicker of annoyance, the quick exchange of words, the way the man's fingers tapped nervously against his mug. There was tension here, subtle but undeniable, and it intrigued her. A small commotion at the far end of the café drew her attention. Little Ellie Mae had knocked over her juice, sending droplets across the floor. A waiter hurried to mop it up, but Agatha observed more than just the spill. She noticed the mother's quick glance toward the stranger, the way she whispered urgently as if fearing the wrong ears might overhear. Each minor reaction was a piece of the puzzle, each gesture carrying the weight of hidden stories. By the time Agatha had finished her tea, she had jotted several pages of observations, interspersed with sketches of faces, tables, and even the arrangement of pastries. The café, warm and inviting as it was, had provided her with a microcosm of the village's undercurrents. Old rivalries, whispered secrets, and hints of alliances she had not fully understood before. The stranger's presence, though unseen directly in this scene, seemed to ripple through the atmosphere, leaving traces in the form of raised eyebrows, whispered words, and stolen glances. Rising with her notebook tucked under one arm, Agatha felt a familiar thrill. The café had offered a blend of comfort and intrigue, a place where ordinary routines masked subtle mysteries. As she stepped back onto the cobbled streets of Carsely, the sunlight felt sharper somehow, as though highlighting paths not yet taken and secrets waiting to be uncovered. Today, she thought, the village itself had become a character in her investigation, full of life, nuance, and hidden stories just waiting for her to untangle. The late afternoon sun dipped low over Carsely, casting a golden haze across the rooftops and cobbled streets. Agatha Raisin, notebook tucked under her arm, wandered toward the edge of the village, where the ruins of the old chapel loomed against the fading light. She had promised herself a quiet stroll, yet something tugged at her curiosity, a gentle insistence that she follow the thread she had glimpsed earlier. And then she saw him, just beyond the gnarled oaks and the scattered stones of the chapel yard. The stranger from the morning stood motionless, his coat brushing the edges of the crumbling wall. A glint caught her eye, a faint flash of silver as the key around his neck swayed slightly in the breeze. Her pulse quickened, not with fear but with anticipation. Carefully, she stepped between the shadows of hedges and leaning fences, each footfall measured so as not to betray her presence. The village seemed unusually quiet, as though even the birds had paused to watch this unfolding moment. Agatha's mind raced with possibilities. Who was he, and why did the silver key matter so much? As she crept closer, a sudden rustle startled a small dog nearby. The animal darted across the path, barking and sending a tin can clattering against a wall. Agatha froze, holding her breath, hoping the noise had not alerted the stranger. The man, however, seemed unfazed, adjusting the ribbon of the key with slow, deliberate movements. A brief smile tugged at her lips. Even amidst the tension, she could not help noticing the stranger's meticulous attention to detail, a man who clearly valued discretion. A wooden gate creaked somewhere behind her as she maneuvered along the perimeter of the ruins, forcing her to step carefully to avoid further disturbances. Her mind catalogued every detail, the angle of the chapel stones, the way shadows stretched across the mossy ground, and the stranger's glances toward the horizon. Each subtle movement suggested a purpose, a plan that Agatha could only guess at. Still, she pressed on, determined to observe without revealing herself. She slowed near a low wall, crouching briefly to let a patch of brambles shield her silhouette. Through the gaps, she could see the silver key catching the last rays of sunlight, twinkling like a beacon against the stranger's dark coat. Her curiosity flared, Was it simply an heirloom, or did it open something more significant, perhaps hidden for generations? A whisper of village lore she had overheard at the café flickered in her mind, tales of secret vaults and long-forgotten treasures tucked away behind familiar facades. The connection felt tantalizingly close. Agatha allowed herself a moment of quiet amusement. The chase was far from perilous, yet it carried the thrill of discovery, the gentle pulse of anticipation that made her mornings in Carsely endlessly fascinating. The stranger moved with careful deliberation, sometimes pausing to inspect a stone, sometimes peering toward the forested outskirts. Each pause offered her insight, each subtle gesture a clue she carefully noted in her mind. Eventually he vanished behind the far edge of the ruins, swallowed by the deepening shadows. Agatha straightened, brushing leaves and dust from her skirt. Though she had lost sight of him, the encounter left her exhilarated rather than anxious. The evening light bathed the village in a soft amber glow, the air carrying the faint scent of honeysuckle and damp earth. She smiled down at her notebook. Today had offered not answers but tantalizing hints, a puzzle slowly taking shape under her watchful eye. As she made her way back toward the heart of Carsely, Agatha reflected on the stranger's purpose, the silver key and the whisper of secrets lingering in the ruins. The village, familiar and cozy, now seemed layered with mysteries waiting for the clever observer to untangle. And Agatha Raisin, ever resourceful and quietly amused by her own curiosity, felt ready for whatever the evening, and the secrets, might bring. Chapter 3: Secrets in the Shadows. Agatha Raisin pushed open the heavy oak door of the Carsely Village Library, the familiar scent of aged paper and polished wood greeting her like an old friend. The soft click of the latch echoed faintly, mingling with the gentle tick of the brass clock above the entrance. Sunlight filtered through tall, narrow windows, dust motes dancing lazily in the beams. Shelves, lined with leather-bound tomes and neatly stacked manuscripts, created narrow aisles that seemed to whisper secrets from decades past. Agatha inhaled deeply, feeling the calm hush of the library settle over her, while a spark of curiosity flickered beneath the surface. The librarian, a wiry man with spectacles perpetually sliding down his nose, peeked from behind a stack of catalog cards. "Ah, Mrs. Raisin," he murmured, his voice hushed yet lively. "Here to chase ghosts of the past, or merely to wander the aisles?" He offered a thin, knowing smile, as though he understood that mysteries often preferred the company of the curious. Agatha returned the smile, adjusting her scarf, and replied, "Perhaps a bit of both, Mr. Penrose. I hear some of Carsely's older secrets may be tucked in these very shelves." He gave a subtle nod and gestured toward a secluded corner, where tables were strewn with maps, photographs, and annotated journals. Agatha approached, her fingers brushing the spines of books that had likely not been opened in decades. The library smelled faintly of lavender polish, mingling with the earthy aroma of paper and ink. She felt a thrill of anticipation, the kind that made her mornings in Carsely unusually alive. Opening an old leather-bound ledger, Agatha traced her fingers across handwritten notes detailing meetings of village committees and social gatherings among prominent families. Some entries were mundane, plans for harvest festivals and charity events, but others hinted at intrigue, unusual gatherings at night, references to a silver token, and cryptic notations that suggested secret corridors or hidden rooms. She scribbled observations in her notebook, careful not to disturb the hushed atmosphere. From across the table, Mr. Penrose muttered softly, "The key always tells more than the map, you know." Agatha paused, looking up, intrigued. "The key?" she asked. He merely tapped the ledger lightly and winked, letting the comment hang in the air like a shadow. There was no need for further explanation. The unspoken suggestion sent her mind racing with possibilities. Agatha turned her attention to a faded photograph tucked between two pages. A group of villagers from nearly a century ago, posed solemnly near what appeared to be a bricked-up doorway. One figure held a glinting object, which she immediately recognized from her earlier observations. A small, silver key, the edges catching the light even in the black and white print. Her pulse quickened. The photograph was more than a relic. It was a clue, an echo of a secret that had persisted through generations. As she made her notes, the soft rustle of pages turned, the occasional creak of the floorboards, and the rhythmic ticking of the clock created a backdrop of quiet tension. Agatha allowed herself a small smile at the librarian's subtle antics, his eccentricity both comforting and curiously helpful. Each cryptic comment, each carefully placed book, added layers to her understanding while preserving the cozy charm of the setting. By the time she rose to leave, the sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the library's aisles. Agatha tucked her notebook under her arm, glancing once more at the photograph and the ledger, aware that the clues she had uncovered were only the beginning. The library, with its whispers and secrets, had given her much to ponder, and she felt the familiar thrill of anticipation that only a well-kept mystery could inspire. Carsely's past was quietly waiting, and she intended to follow every lead. Agatha Raisin lingered in the quiet corner of the Carsely library, her fingers trailing over the spine of an old leather-bound volume titled Records of Village Lineage. The book was thick, its edges frayed and yellowed with age, and she opened it carefully, mindful of the centuries it had witnessed. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows, a gentle rhythm that mixed with the muted rustle of pages and the occasional creak of the floorboards. The scent of musty paper and polish filled the air, grounding her in the calm yet suspenseful atmosphere that she had always adored. As she leafed through the pages, her eyes caught something unusual, a thin, folded slip of paper tucked between the brittle leaves. It had clearly been hidden deliberately, pressed into the book with care. Heart-quickening, she eased it out and unfolded it with precision. The note was written in a small, angular script, faintly faded with age. Its message read, "The silver key unlocks more than doors. Seek the circle beneath the old stones and the past will speak." Agatha paused, letting the words settle. The phrasing was ambiguous, almost poetic, yet undeniably significant. She held the note up to the light, noticing faint impressions on the paper, perhaps a signature or a mark that had worn away over time. Her curiosity surged, tempered by the cautious skepticism that always guided her investigations. Someone had gone to great lengths to leave this message here, but for what purpose? And why hide it in a book that few would notice, in a library frequented by the oblivious and the studious alike? The questions swirled in her mind like the drops of rain tracing paths down the windowpane. Flossie, her gray tabby companion, had slipped into the library with her, now perched gracefully atop a stack of reference books. The cat's amber eyes followed Agatha's every movement, her tail flicking with quiet interest. Agatha smiled, scratching behind Flossie's ears while returning her attention to the note. "Well, Flossie," she murmured, "it seems we've stumbled across something that's been waiting a very long time." Even the rhythmic patter of the rain seemed to underscore the gravity of the discovery, each drop a reminder that the world outside continued, oblivious to the hidden histories tucked within Carsely's quiet corners. Agatha carefully copied the note into her leather-bound notebook, preserving the exact words and leaving ample space for observations and deductions. She sketched a rough diagram of what "the circle beneath the old stones" might refer to, her mind buzzing with possibilities. Could it be a courtyard, a cellar, or some long-forgotten ritual site connected to the village's influential families? The vagueness was tantalizing, offering enough detail to excite, yet withholding full clarity to keep the mystery alive. She glanced around the library again, taking in the warm wooden shelves, the dust motes dancing in the gray light, and the quiet diligence of the few other patrons who had not noticed her small discovery. Even Mr. Penrose, the eccentric librarian, was busy cataloging manuscripts, oblivious to the silent thrill that had just unfolded in his domain. Agatha allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, savoring the intimacy of uncovering a secret that only she, and perhaps a few observant souls, would know. Folding the note carefully, she slipped it back into the book, making a mental note to revisit it later for further study. The silver key, the cryptic message, the old stones, they were threads in a tapestry that stretched beyond the mundane rhythm of village life, waiting for someone curious enough to trace their connections. Agatha straightened, tucking the notebook under her arm and feeling the familiar mix of anticipation and calm that came from a discovery worth pursuing. The rain continued to fall in soft, steady drops, casting a reflective sheen across the windows. Agatha stepped back from the table, glancing once more at the ancient book, the note, and the silent library around her. Somewhere in Carsely, secrets lay hidden in plain sight, waiting for patient eyes and an inquisitive mind. And Agatha Raisin, with Flossie at her side and notebook in hand, felt ready to follow the trail wherever it might lead. Chapter 4. Unexpected Alliances. Agatha Raisin pushed open the door to the Golden Crust, Carsely's beloved bakery, and was immediately greeted by the warm scent of yeast, sugar, and freshly baked bread. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating trays of golden pastries and perfectly risen loaves. Behind the counter stood Mr. Wilkes, the baker, flour dusting his apron and hands, with a wide, welcoming smile that made Agatha feel instantly at ease. "Mrs. Raisin," he exclaimed, wiping his hands on a towel. "Come to sample the morning batch, I presume?" His voice was cheerful, with just a hint of teasing that suggested he enjoyed their small village interactions. Agatha returned his smile, glancing around at the neatly arranged pastries. Her eyes lingered on a tray of fruit tarts, each one meticulously decorated, and then, almost subconsciously, she noticed a faint inscription etched into the edge of a large copper mixing bowl resting on a nearby shelf. She made a mental note of it, odd but the kind of detail she never ignored. "Actually," Agatha said, leaning against the counter, "I was hoping for a bit of conversation more than a taste today. I have questions about the village's history." She tried to keep her tone casual, though her curiosity was keen. Mr. Wilkes chuckled, wiping his hands again. "History, you say? Well, I've been around long enough to know a thing or two. What's caught your attention this time?" His eyes twinkled with amusement, though there was a spark of interest there too, as if he suspected she was on the verge of uncovering something unusual. Agatha lowered her voice and described, in vague terms, her recent encounters with the stranger and her discovery of the silver key. She carefully omitted the cryptic note for now, wanting to see if the baker had any knowledge of local lore that might be relevant. Mr. Wilkes leaned forward, resting his elbows on the counter, flour dust puffing into the sunlight like tiny clouds. "You mean the old family disputes?" he said after a thoughtful pause. Yes, there's always been chatter about hidden passageways and locked cabinets tucked away in some of the older houses. Not that anyone nowadays would know where they are, except, perhaps, a few of us who remember tales from our grandparents." His voice was soft, conspiratorial, as though letting her in on a secret long buried beneath the surface of polite village life. Agatha nodded eagerly, listening as he spoke of long-forgotten rivalries between the Hargroves and the Everetts, feuds sparked by inheritance disputes and contested land. Each anecdote, delivered with Mr. Wilkes's warm humor and occasional chuckle, painted a vivid picture of a village where even small actions could carry echoes of past grievances. She made careful notes, her eyes flicking occasionally to the pastries, imagining the baker's story somehow weaving into the very texture of the bread and tarts he created. "And," he added, glancing at the copper mixing bowl, "sometimes, little things are left behind in the most ordinary objects. I've seen messages scratched into old pans or hidden under shelves. Mostly they're meant to be forgotten, but for someone observant," he trailed off, raising his eyebrows in a way that made Agatha's heart skip. She smiled, imagining the possibilities. Could this bowl, or others like it, hold a clue connected to the silver key? The thought made her pulse quicken, not with fear but with the familiar thrill of discovery. Even the simple act of observing the bakery, its smells, textures, and quiet charm, felt layered with significance. By the time Agatha left the Golden Crust, her notebook was full of details. Whispered stories, minor inscriptions, and subtle hints that connected the village's history to the mystery she had begun to unravel. The warmth of the bakery, combined with the baker's genial humor, left her both amused and invigorated. She stepped back into the village streets, the scent of fresh bread lingering in her senses, and smiled. Today, even the smallest detail might turn out to be a key to uncovering a secret centuries old. Agatha Raisin stepped quietly down the narrow lane that led to the outskirts of Carsely, where the old manor library stood, its ivy-covered walls glowing faintly in the late afternoon light. She had arranged to meet Mr. Thorne, a local historian known for his meticulous record-keeping and slightly mysterious demeanor. The air was cool and smelled faintly of damp leaves, carrying the distant hum of village life, yet here in this secluded corner, the world seemed hushed as though it were allowing secrets to surface. The heavy wooden door creaked open, revealing Mr. Thorne's study. A small fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm shadows across shelves lined with yellowed ledgers, archival boxes and meticulously labeled jars. Soft lamplight illuminated the room, bouncing off the polished wooden floor and highlighting the historian's sharp, inquisitive features. He gestured toward a chair, his eyes glinting with restrained excitement. "Mrs. Raisin," he said, "I've been expecting someone with curiosity sharp enough to follow the trail of the silver key. But discretion is paramount. Not all secrets are meant for casual ears." Agatha lowered herself into the chair, her notebook poised on her lap. "I understand completely," she replied. "And I assure you discretion is my specialty." She allowed herself a small smile, noting the careful placement of documents and the faint smell of aged paper mixed with the firewood. Even the historian's measured tone carried an air of gentle anticipation, drawing her further into the mystery. Mr. Thorne began pulling records from a nearby shelf, family trees, handwritten correspondences, and old maps marked with symbols whose meanings were no longer widely known. "The key," he murmured, "has been in and out of the village's history for generations. It's tied to something of considerable importance, though the details were always deliberately obscured. Many believed it merely ceremonial, yet hints suggest a treasure, or perhaps a secret, long buried." Agatha leaned closer, her pen moving quickly across her notebook as she traced his words. The historian spoke methodically, explaining cryptic notations and symbols, occasionally pausing to let the fire crackle and the shadows deepen, emphasizing the gravity of his revelations. Even without full disclosure, each detail built a richer picture of the village's hidden past. At one point, he drew a careful diagram of an old estate and pointed to a small circular marking near the cellar. Some believe this might indicate the original vault, though no one alive today has seen it. The key was meant to unlock it, but the instructions were deliberately fragmented over time. Agatha's curiosity flared. The thrill was not in certainty, but in piecing together partial truths, imagining the path the key might follow. As the meeting drew to a close, Mr. Thorne carefully replaced the documents and cast a cautious glance at the fire. "You now know more than most," he said softly. "Treat it wisely. Curiosity is a powerful tool, but secrecy is its companion." Agatha nodded, tucking her notebook under her arm, feeling the warmth of the fire behind her as she prepared to leave. Stepping back into the fading daylight, she inhaled the cool air, her mind already racing with possibilities. The historian had shared just enough to ignite her determination, leaving tantalizing fragments that promised a greater revelation. Carsely, quiet and familiar as it seemed, was layered with hidden histories, and Agatha Raisin, ever observant and delightfully persistent, was ready to follow every lead. Chapter 5. Clues Converge. Agatha Raisin spread the delicate aged map across the polished oak table in her sitting room, the silver key resting beside it like a silent companion. The map was yellowed and frayed at the edges, filled with cryptic symbols and lines that twisted like the veins of a leaf. She traced her finger along the markings, noting how certain locations in Carsely corresponded with faint annotations in the corner. A small circle near the chapel ruins, a cross by the old mill, and a cluster of dots around the manor grounds. Each symbol seemed intentionally obscure, as if designed to test the observer's patience and perception. Her cat, Flossie, pawed gently at the edge of the map, sending a folded corner fluttering. Agatha laughed softly, brushing the feline aside while keeping her eyes fixed on the map. "Not now, Flossie," she murmured. "This is serious work." Yet even in this focused moment, there was a sense of warmth, the cozy light from the lamp casting a soft glow across the room, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed tea beside her. Mystery, she thought, could be thrilling without ever losing its charm. The silver key gleamed faintly under the lamp's light, its polished surface hinting at importance beyond mere ornamentation. Agatha held it delicately, turning it over in her hand, and considered the symbols on the map. Something clicked, a subtle detail others might overlook. One circle on the map aligned almost perfectly with the angle of the chapel ruins she had observed at sunset. Could this be the site the key was meant to unlock? The thought sent a ripple of excitement through her. Her friend James Lacey arrived as if on cue, carrying a box of pastries from the Golden Crust. "I hope I'm not interrupting your treasure hunting," he said with a grin, placing the box on the table. Agatha smirked, appreciating the levity he brought to the room. "Not at all, James. In fact, your timing is impeccable. I could use a second pair of eyes, and perhaps some commentary that doesn't come from a cat." Together they examined the map. James leaned over, pointing to one of the clusters near the manor. "Looks like someone wanted to confuse the trail," he said, tapping the paper gently. "Or maybe just make sure only the truly curious notice." Agatha laughed softly, enjoying his dry wit. "Exactly. But see here," she said, indicating the circle near the chapel. "The alignment, the scale, the faint notations in the margins, they all suggest this is the overlooked spot." James raised an eyebrow. "You mean the key fits there?" "Possibly," Agatha replied, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "But that's the point, isn't it? We have to test the theory without revealing our cards to the entire village." She paused, tapping the key against the map lightly. "And it's not just about doors. Something is hidden, something intentionally concealed, and this key is the only tool we've been given." They continued to discuss, speculate, and debate the possibilities, their conversation a blend of analysis and humor. Even the minor distractions, the cat curling atop the map, the occasional creak of floorboards, added warmth and familiarity to the investigative process. Agatha felt that perfect combination of alertness and comfort, the thrill of piecing together clues, tempered by the simple pleasure of companionship. By the time the discussion wound down, the map and the key had revealed a clearer picture of where to search next. Agatha tucked the key into her pocket, her notebook brimming with notes, sketches, and observations. The village, so familiar in daylight, had transformed into a landscape of secrets waiting to be discovered. And with a grin, she realized that the real excitement, the playful challenge of discovery, was only just beginning. Agatha Raisin moved quietly along the narrow lane leading to the chapel ruins, her coat pulled tightly against the crisp evening air. Moonlight spilled across the cobblestones, turning each stone into a silvered tile, and the soft chorus of crickets accompanied her careful footsteps. The village was serene at first glance, as if the quiet night itself were a protective cloak, yet Agatha knew better. Every shadow, every flicker of movement could hold a clue, and she kept her senses alert. She crouched behind a low hedge, notebook tucked under one arm and the silver key resting securely in her pocket. The ruins loomed ahead, skeletal arches silhouetted against the moon, their stones bathed in silvery light. Agatha adjusted her scarf and peered through the gaps in the crumbling walls, noting the way the wind stirred the overgrown grass, creating shifting patterns of shadow. The scene was peaceful, yet she felt the familiar pulse of anticipation, the thrill of discovery wrapped in the calm of a quiet night. A sudden rustle drew her attention. A figure emerged from the far side of the ruins, moving with careful, deliberate steps. Agatha's breath caught, not with fear but with alert curiosity. The person was cloaked and hooded, their movements measured, almost ritualistic. She watched as they paused, glancing over their shoulder, then knelt near the base of one of the broken arches. Moonlight glinted faintly off something in their hand, a small metallic object. Her pulse quickened, the glimmer reminded her unmistakably of the silver key. Agatha remained still, allowing the night's natural sounds to camouflage her presence. The soft chirping of crickets, the distant rustle of leaves, even the occasional call of an owl, all these gentle noises contrasted with the tension of the unfolding scene. She scribbled quick notes in her notebook, capturing details, posture, clothing, timing of movements. Each observation brought her closer to understanding what the key might unlock, who else knew of it, and what secrets lay buried beneath the ruins. A small slip of gravel betrayed a movement behind her, but it was only Flossie who had stealthily followed. The cat padded softly, tail high, eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Agatha allowed a quiet smile, appreciating the subtle humor and companionship in the midst of suspense. Even at night, the cozy rhythm of familiar routines, the cat's presence, her warm coat, the notebook in hand, kept her grounded. The cloaked figure moved on, pausing at a circular indentation in the ground, brushing away debris and examining the stones as if searching for a clue only they could interpret. Agatha held her breath, straining to catch every motion, every detail, knowing that this was a rare glimpse into the unfolding puzzle. The night itself seemed to hold its breath alongside her, a quiet witness to the hidden activity. When the figure finally retreated into the shadows, Agatha exhaled softly, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. The moonlight still bathed the ruins in its silver glow, highlighting the gaps and contours of the stones that now held even more significance. She tucked her notebook under her arm, adjusting the key in her pocket, and began the quiet walk back to her cottage, the cool night air sharp with mystery and promise. Chapter 6. Secrets Unravel. Agatha Raisin paused at the base of the ivy-covered wall near the manor's old courtyard, her gloved fingers brushing aside tangled vines that had clung stubbornly over the years. Beneath the greenery, she noticed the faint outline of bricks that did not align with the surrounding stonework. Her pulse quickened. Something here had been deliberately concealed, a secret waiting for someone patient and curious enough to notice. She knelt, gently tapping the bricks with the handle of her notebook. A hollow sound echoed back, sharp and clear. Carefully she pressed against one of the bricks. At first nothing happened. Then, with a soft click and a subtle shift, a section of the wall gave way, revealing a narrow, dimly lit passage. A musty, earthy scent drifted out, tinged with the faint aroma of aged paper and wood. Agatha's heart leapt. She retrieved her flashlight from her coat pocket, its beams slicing through the darkness and illuminating the uneven stone floor ahead. She crouched low and stepped inside, the passage tight but navigable. Each step sent tiny pebbles skittering across the floor, their muted clatter swallowed by the surrounding stone walls. The passage led to a small room tucked beneath the manor, long forgotten and filled with dust-covered relics. Agatha's flashlight beam swept over stacks of journals, an assortment of trinkets, and a wooden chest with intricate carvings that echoed a faint resemblance to the silver key she carried. She ran her fingers lightly across the spines of the journals, careful not to damage them. The room smelled of old paper and polished wood, comforting despite the thrill of discovery. Each artifact seemed to whisper stories from a past long hidden, connecting seamlessly to the mystery she had been chasing. A faint draft stirred loose papers in one corner, revealing a yellowed envelope tucked beneath a journal. Agatha retrieved it, noting its delicate cursive script. Though she did not open it immediately, the envelope hinted at further clues, a promise that her investigation was only beginning. She examined the chest, tracing the carvings, and wondered if the silver key she had carried for weeks might fit. Her mind raced with possibilities, each thought accompanied by the low creak of hinges and the echo of her cautious footsteps. Flossie, who had insisted on accompanying her despite the narrow confines, padded softly behind, tail high and ears flicking attentively. Agatha allowed herself a small smile at the cat's presence. The quiet companionship made the eerie, abandoned space feel less foreboding. She set about documenting her findings, sketching diagrams of the chest, marking positions of journals, and noting peculiar symbols that mirrored those on the map. Every detail mattered. After a careful survey, Agatha stepped back, letting her flashlight beam linger on the entire room. The hidden passage had revealed its first secrets, but the sense of anticipation remained, hints of further revelations waiting just out of reach. The manor, with its layers of history, dust, and shadow, had transformed into a treasure trove of discovery, blending the cozy thrill of exploration with the pulse of a mystery slowly unraveling. She felt both exhilarated and cautious, knowing the next steps would demand patience, cleverness, and careful observation. Agatha Raisin settled onto a low stool in the hidden room, the lantern beside her casting a warm, golden glow across the dusty floor. Faint motes of dust danced lazily in the light, drifting over journals, photographs, and scattered papers. She spread everything before her carefully, giving each item the attention it deserved. The silver key, now resting in the center of the assortment, gleamed softly, as if aware that it had finally reached a space where its purpose could be uncovered. She began with the journals, flipping through pages filled with cramped, meticulous handwriting. Names repeated, some familiar from her conversations in the village, others long forgotten. Agatha's eyes narrowed as she noted cryptic references to gatherings held under the circle, and mentions of a small emblem, a stylized key intertwined with a crescent moon. Her pulse quickened. The pieces were slowly beginning to form a coherent pattern. Next, she examined the photographs, old black and white images of villagers dressed in formal attire, often in the library or courtyard of the manor. In one image, a group of figures clustered around a stone arch, their hands clasped in ways that suggested a ritual rather than a simple photograph. At the center of the gathering, a small silver object gleamed faintly, unmistakably resembling the key she now held. Agatha leaned closer, her brow furrowed, piecing together what these gatherings might have signified. Secret society, perhaps, she murmured to herself, her voice a whisper barely carrying in the stillness. She made a note, sketching the layout of the arch and the arrangement of participants, connecting symbols on the photographs to those in the journals. Each detail seemed deliberate, a thread woven into a larger tapestry of village history. A faint creak echoed from the passage behind her, but Flossie's calm presence reminded Agatha that she was alone with only the past. She smiled at the cat, who now perched atop a stack of journals, tail flicking with interest. Her thoughts returned to the silver key, turning it gently in her hand. It was not simply a trinket. It had function and significance, a tangible connection to the village's hidden heritage. Agatha noticed that some of the papers bore partial instructions, fragments of a code, directions to a location known only to a few, and references to the vault beneath the old stones. Her heart lifted with the familiar thrill of understanding. She began arranging the notes in sequence, aligning them with the photographs and the key's inscriptions. The puzzle, though incomplete, now suggested a coherent objective, a concealed chamber accessible only through careful observation, historical knowledge, and the silver key itself. She paused for a moment, letting the lantern's glow illuminate the room's treasures. Each artifact, each faded photograph, and every cryptic note had led her here, to the cusp of discovery. The cozy quiet, the faint smell of old paper, and the soft lantern light combined to create a sense of serene purpose. Agatha felt that familiar mixture of curiosity, satisfaction, and eager anticipation, the feeling that comes from uncovering just enough to ignite both the mind and the imagination. Rising, she tucked the journals carefully back into stacks, her eyes lingering on the silver key. The puzzle was nearly solved. The next step, she realized, would bring her closer to the heart of the secret society and the hidden treasure it protected. With a quiet determination, she stepped toward the passage, ready to follow the trail wherever it might lead. Chapter 7: Confrontations and Confessions. Agatha Raisin was perched on the edge of her favorite armchair, notebook open and pen poised, reviewing the clues she had gathered so far. The soft evening light filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow across her sitting room, and Flossie purred contentedly on the windowsill. The tranquility was suddenly interrupted by a cautious knock at the door. Agatha's eyebrows shot up. Visitors at this hour were rare, and the tone of the knock carried an unfamiliar hesitation. She opened the door to find the stranger standing there, cloak damp from the evening drizzle, hood pushed back to reveal sharp, thoughtful eyes. "Mrs. Raisin," he began, his voice low and earnest, "I believe it's time we spoke." Agatha stepped aside, inviting him in, though her mind buzzed with questions. She noted his careful movements, the way his gloved hands avoided touching anything unnecessarily, and even the slight tilt of his head as if evaluating her in turn. "Do come in," Agatha said, gesturing toward the armchair across from hers. Flossie, ever curious, jumped down from the windowsill and brushed against the stranger's ankle. He startled slightly, offering a faint smile. "Ah, your companion is lively," he said. Agatha suppressed a laugh. "That's one way to put it," she replied, seating herself and giving the cat an affectionate scratch behind the ears. "Now, I suppose you have an explanation for all of this. The key, the cryptic behavior." The stranger shifted in his seat, glancing at the silver key displayed on the table. Yes. The key, he murmured. It has belonged to my family for generations. The secrets it protects, well, they are more personal than you might imagine. I did not mean to frighten the village, or you, but circumstances required discretion. Agatha leaned forward, pen poised, her curiosity piqued. Personal? Pray do elaborate. This is a small village, but secrets tend to have a long memory. He nodded, recounting fragmented stories of his ancestors, old rivalries, and a promise made decades ago to safeguard a hidden chamber beneath the manor. His explanations were interspersed with small pauses, moments where he seemed unsure whether to reveal too much. At one point he attempted to gesture toward the fireplace, but misjudged the distance and nearly knocked over a small porcelain figurine. Agatha's lips twitched in suppressed amusement. Careful, she murmured, not everything here is built to withstand dramatic gestures. Despite the occasional awkwardness, his words shed light on the puzzle. The silver key, he explained, was meant to unlock a vault containing documents and artifacts of immense historical value, not only to his family but to the village itself. His presence, initially unsettling, now felt more human, relatable. Agatha noted the subtle mix of sincerity, nervousness, and mild embarrassment in his tone, a man caught between duty and hesitation. You understand, Mrs. Raisin, that trust is fragile, he added, glancing at her with earnest eyes. Agatha nodded slowly, her mind weighing caution against curiosity. Indeed. But trust, like curiosity, must be earned, she said gently, allowing a small, knowing smile. The tension in the room softened. The stranger's motives, though complicated, were no longer opaque. His connection to the silver key, once shrouded in ambiguity, now made sense, even if further questions lingered. As the evening deepened and shadows lengthened across the sitting room, Agatha realized that the stranger's return was a turning point. With truth partially revealed, and with humor and warmth punctuating their dialogue, she felt ready to follow the trail to its next stage. The key, the vault, and the village's secrets were all within reach, but the final revelation still waited, tantalizingly close yet just beyond her grasp. Agatha Raisin settled into her favorite armchair, the fire crackling softly in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the cozy cottage walls. The stranger took the chair opposite her, careful not to displace anything on the side table. Flossie, ever observant, had curled herself into a tight ball on the rug, purring intermittently as the warmth from the flames seeped into the room. The cottage smelled faintly of cinnamon and brewed tea, the kind of comforting aroma that made secrets feel easier to share. For a few moments, silence hung between them, punctuated only by the low hiss of the fire and the occasional pop of a stray ember. Agatha broke the quiet first, her voice light but curious. You've traveled a long path to protect that key. I imagine the stories you could tell would fill the entire village library. She allowed herself a small smile, observing the stranger's hesitant posture and careful gestures. He nodded, fingers steepled together. Indeed, though much has been forgotten, or deliberately hidden. My family's history is intertwined with Carsely in ways most villagers do not understand. The silver key, it is more than a physical object. It represents trust, responsibility, and a promise kept over generations. He paused, glancing at the fire as if searching for courage in the flickering light. Agatha leaned forward, her notebook forgotten for a moment. And the vault beneath the manor? She asked. It contains these promises? Yes, he said softly. Documents, records, even artifacts that speak to past decisions and mistakes. Some were trivial, some consequential. The key ensures that only those who are diligent, careful, and observant can access them. He shifted slightly, brushing an imaginary speck of dust from his sleeve, a subtle display of nervousness. Agatha chuckled, a warm, low sound. Well, that narrows the field considerably. Her eyes twinkled with amusement. I suppose that makes me both fortunate and slightly terrified. He allowed himself a small, rueful smile, and for a moment, the weight of centuries of secrets seemed to lift slightly. They began exchanging stories, tales of village life, old rivalries, and curious ancestors whose choices had shaped the present. He recounted minor confusions from his family history, amusing missteps, and the reasons certain events had been kept hidden. Agatha, in turn, shared observations, humorous anecdotes, and her own careful deductions, weaving light-hearted commentary into the unfolding narrative. Flossie stretched and twitched an ear toward the crackling flames, as if affirming the comfort of the room. Agatha and the stranger spoke with measured pace, the warmth of the fire softening tension while each revelation added a layer of intrigue. Partial truths were shared, lingering questions clarified, and subtle hints toward the next stage of discovery were dropped like breadcrumbs. By the time the fire had dwindled to glowing embers, Agatha felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Some mysteries had been illuminated, yet the evening left room for anticipation. The puzzle was not entirely solved, but clarity and comfort coexisted in equal measure. With the cat nestled nearby, the fire's glow reflecting in her eyes, she realized that trust had been earned, and that the next steps in uncovering Carsely's secrets would be both thrilling and entirely within reach. Chapter 8. Resolution and Reflection. Agatha Raisin stood at the threshold of the manor's hidden vault, the soft glow of her lantern illuminating the carved wooden door. She held the silver key delicately in her hand, feeling its weight, not heavy, but significant in a way that transcended mere metal. The air smelled faintly of aged wood and stone, tinged with the subtle scent of the outside garden wafting through a half-open window. Every sound, the gentle rustle of leaves, the distant toll of the village clock, seemed amplified in the quiet stillness, as if the manor itself held its breath for the moment. With a deep breath, Agatha inserted the key into the intricate lock. It turned smoothly, the faint click echoing through the stone chamber. She pushed the door open to reveal a small room, modest yet meticulously preserved. Inside were shelves lined with historical documents, photographs of villagers long past, and artifacts of local significance. A silver chalice from a forgotten ceremony, journals recounting generations of events, and letters documenting village life across decades. It was less treasure in the conventional sense and more a carefully curated legacy, a testament to those who had shaped Carsely's quiet but intricate history. Agatha stepped inside, her fingers brushing lightly over the objects. Each piece seemed to speak in whispers, connecting past to present. She noticed small personal touches, the way a certain letter was folded with care, a pressed flower tucked between pages, a journal with ink faded to a soft brown. Her heart warmed with understanding. The silver key had been a guardian, ensuring that only someone attentive, respectful, and curious could access the memories and lessons it protected. It was, she realized, a bridge between generations, a tangible link to the village's heritage. Flossie padded softly into the vault, tail flicking inquisitively, and Agatha couldn't help but smile. "Yes, my dear," she murmured, "it seems even history has a companion for every observer." She carefully documented her findings, sketching diagrams of the shelves and making notes on inscriptions and dates. There was a rhythm to the process, a comforting cadence that combined the thrill of discovery with the steady reassurance of order. As she worked, Agatha reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The stranger's cautious confessions, the historian's methodical guidance, the baker's whimsical insights, all had contributed threads to a tapestry of understanding. She thought of the villagers she had observed, Mrs. Hargrove's subtle frown, the miller's whispered comment, and even the casual glances of passers-by that now seemed pregnant with hidden meaning. Carsely, with its cobblestone streets and quaint cottages, had revealed layers of history that were both ordinary and extraordinary, tied together by the silver key's quiet legacy. Finally, Agatha stepped back, placing the key gently on a velvet cloth beside the door. She allowed herself a moment of amusement, picturing the inevitable curiosity of future generations who might stumble upon this secret. There was satisfaction in closure, yet the faint hint of further mysteries lingered in the corners of her mind. A crooked brick, a half-hidden inscription, the faint echo of past footsteps. Carsely, she realized, would always hold secrets, and the key was merely one piece of a larger, ongoing story. With a contented sigh, she extinguished the lantern and turned toward the exit, Flossie trailing closely. The warm glow of the setting sun spilled into the courtyard, reflecting off cobblestones and flowering hedges. Agatha smiled at the comforting absurdity and quiet charm of her village, at the mix of human quirks and historical echoes that made Carsely alive and unpredictable. The silver key had revealed its purpose, yet in its resolution lay the gentle promise that curiosity, adventure, and cozy mysteries would endure, just as the village itself endured, layered, intricate, and quietly magical. Agatha Raisin stepped into her garden, the early morning sun casting a soft, golden glow over the dewy grass and flower beds. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of freshly baked bread from the bakery down the lane and the delicate fragrance of roses climbing the trellis. Flossie padded beside her, tail held high, pausing occasionally to investigate a fluttering leaf or a curious shadow. Agatha wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, inhaling deeply and savoring the calm, comforting rhythm of village life returning to its gentle routine. She carried her teacup, steam rising in delicate spirals, and settled onto the wooden bench by the small stone fountain. Across the garden, the village square was beginning to stir, Mrs. Hargrove arranging flowers outside her shop, the postman carefully balancing letters in his satchel, and children scurrying past, laughing and chasing one another. Life in Carsely, so familiar yet layered with small secrets, unfolded in ordinary yet satisfying motions. Agatha's eyes twinkled with quiet amusement as she observed, her mind still delighting in the recent discoveries, yet alert to the subtle hints of future intrigue. Flossie leapt onto the bench, curling beside her owner, tail wrapping gently around her paw. Agatha stroked the cat absently, sipping her tea and letting the warmth seep in. Even as the village returned to its daily rhythm, she noticed little details that might escape an ordinary observer. A furtive glance exchanged between the miller and a passing stranger, a package left unattended near the shop door, the faintly peculiar arrangement of chairs outside the café. Each small observation was a reminder that, though the silver key's mystery had been resolved, life in Carsely remained layered, curious, and quietly unpredictable. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it faint snippets of conversation. "Did you hear about the late visitor?" one villager murmured to another. "Some say he was looking for something more than just the key." Agatha smiled subtly at the snippets she overheard, appreciating the village's endless capacity for quiet intrigue. Even ordinary moments held the potential for adventure, provided one watched closely enough. She took another sip of tea, allowing herself a small sigh of contentment. The morning sunlight shimmered on the fountain's water, highlighting the tiny ripples made by a few early birds landing delicately along its edge. Agatha felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Her curiosity had been rewarded, the village's secret history had been illuminated, yet the gentle suggestion of unresolved mysteries remained, keeping life in Carsely vibrant and alive. Flossie twitched an ear and yawned, stretching luxuriously across her lap. Agatha laughed softly, setting down her cup and watching the cat's movements. With a quiet sense of anticipation and warmth, she considered the day ahead. Perhaps new letters would arrive, perhaps new puzzles would unfold, but for now she simply relished the comforting scenery, the soft sounds of the waking village, and the knowledge that even in tranquility, adventure was never far away. Carsely, cozy, charming, and ever intriguing, had once again offered its secrets, and its delights, to those willing to observe.